So I was teaching the Bible class that I have going on at work on Tuesday, and there was a new guy that come in that just joined that day. And before we get into the text, we usually just kind of visit, have a little bit of fellowship for a few minutes. And I had never met him, and so I was just kind of talking with him and the few other guys that were in there. And he had asked me a couple of questions and raised a couple of topics. And one of them is one of the questions that every believer at some point either asks or hears being asked. And that question being, what about the fourth quarter conversion? What about those people that convert on their deathbed? That they've lived this long life by themselves, living how they want to live, and you know, not even giving a second thought to God. But then at the end of their life, they have the epiphany and they make the decision to become a disciple. Then they get into heaven after having lived this life of lust and really just whatever they want to do. They get to go to heaven? And I call this the older brother syndrome. In Luke 15, Jesus tells a parable of the prodigal son. And that's what the parable is known as, is the prodigal son parable. But it really should be called the parable of the two sons. Because the man in the story has two sons, and he speaks about two sons. The younger son, the prodigal son, is the one that's more well known. It probably because it's at the first half of the story, but also because it's the happier of the two stories, because the other son, it isn't as uplifting and positive, and it leaves kind of a question at the end of it. Very quickly, the story is that there's a man who has two sons, an older and a younger, and the younger comes and says, "Give me my inheritance." The man gives him his inheritance, which he didn't have to do. And the younger son then goes off, wastes the money, and is left in a destitute state. And he comes to his senses and he goes back home saying, you know, I'll just be a hired hand. I don't even want to be a son. I just want to be hired hand. He goes home and his father receives him lovingly and restores him to his full sonship. And the older brother, who is out working in the fields, hears the party going on and asks what's going on. "Oh, your brother's come back. And your dad's bringing him back home." And the older brother is bitter about it. The older brother is very angry. And he doesn't go into the party, and the father comes out and reasons with him. And the older brother says, "Hey, I have lived all this life working for you. I did not shirk my responsibility. I did everything you asked. And yet, when this son of yours," he says, "this son of yours comes back, you welcome him with open arms after he's wasted his life." And the father says, "Son, everything that you said is true." That's one thing that you can't miss in that story, is the father doesn't look at the older son and say, "Worked all the time, done everything, and never asked me for anything." No. He says, "You're right. You've done everything you've done, said is correct. But my son has returned. We should be rejoicing and not angry." And that's how the story ends. So he tells this story, and it's meant for two audiences. The one audience who has the comeback, whether they be at the fourth quarter or very early in the game. They're the ones that were living this life of sin, and yet they come back and they say, "You know what, I want to be part of this family again." And you have those others who have been serving God. And some of those people are going to be bitter about the ones that are welcomed in. He's talking there to the Pharisees, who look at the regular man who's not as holy and righteous as they are, and seeing Jesus go and welcome them and thinking, wait, why is this guy, we're the good ones, we're the righteous ones, why is he coming to them? If he was really the Messiah, he would be seeing our righteousness and praising us for it. So when that issue is brought up to me, my response is usually something along the lines of, okay, that's a fair question. However, are you looking at your life walking with God in a negative way? Because if you weren't looking at it as in something of a negative way, you wouldn't have that attitude. Your attitude would be more like the fathers of, hey, great, another one in the kingdom. Wonderful. Another person saved from hell by Jesus Christ. That is the whole point of Jesus' mission, is to save souls, and he saved another one. I use the analogy of being married. So you have a couple who are married at a young age, and you have a couple that gets married in their, 40s, like my wife and I. And then maybe you have a couple that people that have never been married, and they get married at the old folks' home. And so you look at those three marriages. The one who is married when they're 20, by the time they get to their end of their life and they meet their reward sometime in their 70s, 80s, whatever, you look at their marriage and all that they experienced in their marriage. And then you look at the people that are in their 60s when they got married, or even 70s, and they only have, a handful of years. Who had the better experience in life? Who could look back on their life and say, I had just this amazing, fulfilling life because I got to share it with someone the entire time? My wife and I, if we live to be, 80, we'll have had 40 years. If my parents live to their 80, they're going to have had 60 years. So that extra time, they have obviously more difficult experiences, but they have more of the blessing, the wonderful experience. When we look at those that make that fourth quarter conversion, we look and we say, look at all they've missed out on. Look at all of the times where they were hurting in life and they couldn't turn to God. Look at all of those times where maybe they had to deal with some kind of sickness with themselves or with somebody that they love. And who would they pray? They might pray, but are they praying in faith like God wants us to pray? I don't know. But my lifelong walk with God has afforded me having somebody having my back the entire time. And that does not mean I've always done everything that I'm supposed to. I'm not. I love that Paul in Romans, or actually, I'm not sure what book, says that he is the chief sinner. How can somebody who's writing the majority of the New Testament, and we see living this life of service to the point where he gets put to death after being stoned and shipwrecked and all these other things, he can say, no, I'm the worst of the worst. No, you're not, bro. There's a lot of people worse than you. But he understands that he was a sinner who was saved. We need to look at those that have that fourth quarter conversion as, hey, wonderful, another one saved, and almost have pity on them because of this whole life that they lived. I think some people that have that, well, wait a minute, they get salvation instead of damnation just because at the end, wait a minute, there's two problems with that. Number one, are you looking at your life as a life of lacking? Well, I'd like to go do whatever sinning that the average non-disciple does? What does that mean? Well, I would like to go sleep around. I would like to go fornicate left and right, or commit adultery left and right. I want to go get hammered with my buddies. I want to go out and just live it up as far as alcohol or drugs or anything like that. I don't want to be honest with people. I want to I'll run a business where I'm able to lie and cheat and make more money than somebody that's honest. You want to do that? That's what you want to do? Because this is always going to be an eternal struggle between the spirit and the flesh. Just the flesh wanting to do whatever it wants to do, and the spirit calling us to be righteous. In John chapter 15, or I don't know, maybe it's not 15. In the book of John, Jesus says that I have come to give life and give it abundantly. He wants us to live a life of a disciple, knowing just how much he gives to us. Knowing that walking the life of a disciple has so much more to offer than anything the world has to offer. That the life of a disciple is full of the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, self-control. That life is not a life of lacking. You are not missing out. That old FOMO thing that's running around with the kids now, fear of missing out. You aren't missing out. You aren't missing out. Come and live a life of abundance. Come to a saving faith. Join a good church, a Bible-believing, Bible-teaching church. Join that church and become active in it. And just see just how much love there can be when you're in a good church with great disciples, and the relationships you build. This is what God has called us to be, is this disciple. And a disciple who lives that kind of life will never look at somebody in the fourth quarter and coming to Jesus and go, man, they got to have a lot of fun. They're going to look at that person and go, hey man, I am so happy that you're a disciple. I'm so happy that you get to be in glory. But you missed out. There was so much. And I think a lot of times those people are going to acknowledge, yeah, I lived a life that, to the world looks like it was probably a lot of fun. But I can only imagine what my life would be had I been this disciple the entire time. Always try to see the positive in the salvation of others. Always try to see that there's opportunities to make those disciples. As one of my spiritual mentors would say, as he would close out Sunday morning worship services, my brother Mark Kirchhoff, I hope he's doing well. Have a great day in the Lord.